When he says it, he means it, and you don't get to bend it and twist it to what you want. That's the whole point of Deuteronomy 8:2. He's allowing you to walk through this wilderness walk so that you can prove whether or not it's in your heart to do what he says. I focus a lot on the commandments, but ultimately it's about people. It's about living together forever with people.
Deceive you and pull you away. The wisdom of man is unrighteousness, but the wisdom of Yah is all you need. But sometimes it's hard to be wise, so pray. I want to be wise in your eyes, but all of these lies are surrounding me. I'm blind to your light, and all these people in my way. They make my path unrighteous. I pray to you and you make it straight. Take away the darkness and make it light. You are the light of the world. You are Yah, you are Yah, you are Yah. this man, you know you're the same. So if they do something to you, forgive and forget. So I have an unforgiving heart. If your shoe, I forgave your sins. So I cause trouble with your brothers, 'cause in the Torah you're the same. So you owe someone and you beg for forgiveness, but now you've been forgiven and you won't do the same. So I have an unforgiving heart. If your shoe, I forgave your sins. So I cause trouble with your brothers, 'cause in the Torah you're the same. So have an unforgiving heart. If your shoe, I forgave your sins. So cause trouble with your brothers, 'cause in the Torah you're the same. So unforgiving heart. We've been walking in a straight line. When will it end? I know I've sinned, but I've learned my lesson. So please forgive us. Now I ask you to hear my prayer tonight. Take me to the land of freedom. Give me salvation. We've been walking for almost 40 years. take us to your promised land? It fills you with hopes and dreams instead of beating day and night. Forgive us. Now I ask you to hear my prayer tonight. Take me to the land of freedom. Give me salvation. We've been walking for almost 40 years, and now I'm shedding tears because I know I've sinned, but I'm asking, will you take us, take me to the land of freedom? You answered 1,000,000 prayers, oh yeah. You took us from captivity and freed us. You answered 1,000,000 prayers, oh yeah. You took us from captivity and freed us. You took me to the land of freedom.
All right, so welcome to our first of our several days of scripture readings. Okay, we have 5 days of this. We've got it today, Monday, Tuesday. We skip Wednesday, and then we have it again on Thursday and Friday. Okay, we're going to be reading the book of Yochanan. You know, years ago, because of the instruction in Deuteronomy, there's an instruction that says that when you come to keep Sukkot, you should read the book or the covenant or the law. And of course, the covenant contract in essence is the book of Deuteronomy. So our tradition had been to read the book of Deuteronomy. And then we realized as we were adding on to our observances, keeping as a week-long event the first of the Shalosh Regalim, the first of the Chagim, that we should read something also every day. And so we thought, why not read? Because after all, we are beginning the journey, and we are also talking about Passover, and we're talking about the events after Passover as they start the journey, exodusing out of Egypt in the Old Testament, but also the journey of the new, the rebirthing of the regathering of Israel through the apostles. And so the journey of Yeshua. And so we thought we would read one of the Gospels. And so we've been doing that now for many years. And this year we're going to be reading Yochanan, which means next year we'll probably be doing Matthew, which we kind of rotate through them, okay? So we're doing John. Okay, so before we get started, though, I have a couple of quick announcements to make. First of all, somebody is walking around with 3, not 4 tzitzit. It's one thing to catch you without your coin. It's another thing to catch you without your tzitzit. Yeah, it's probably my son's. I don't know, but anyway. Okay. All right. Did I coin you too? You're looking for it. Come on, let's go. I'm waiting. Okay. So let me just quickly cover some of the things that you need to know for today. All right. Today we are going to do the scripture readings until lunch. After lunch, we're going to have a foot washing and mikvah. Okay. So let's meet here. Okay, for that, the way you would dress for one, you would dress for the other anyway. So if you're going to get your whole body wet, you're also going to get your feet wet. What's the difference? All right? We'll have it figured out by then which one we're going to do first and how that's going to happen. What we decided to do, because I've had several people who are not living in the big city and have actually lived in the country and know more about ponds than I do, that the lake pond thing they've got here is more than adequate for us to use and easy enough to get into and that kind of thing. So we're going to use the one here on property. Okay? Which makes it much more convenient. There's also a bathhouse right by the lake there, so you could change there and, you know, get dried off afterwards and change and all those kinds of things. So it's kind of nice and convenient over there, okay? So as you're leaving property, there'll be a slight turn off before you get off the property to the right where the ropes courses are and all the other things, and that's going to be where you're going to be headed towards the lake. But if we start here, we can all follow down there together, okay? And we can work that out. All right. Some of you have asked about the mikvah. You have one requirement, really, and that is that you've read the declarations and that you can assure me that you understand what it is you're doing. Because what you're doing is really a private covenanting between you and Abba, and so it's not for me to tell you can't do it, you can do it, it's your choice. I mean, this is your covenanting, your relationship with him. It's just my job as an authority, as a leader, to make sure that I've at least vetted you to the point of saying, do you understand what you're doing? Same thing like if you wanted to get married. I would never stop you from doing that. I'm just going to make sure you have convinced me that you know what you're doing, okay? That this is what you want to do. So as long as you have the 8 declarations, you don't need to come to me and tell me you're doing it today. Just show up ready to go. Bring your papers with you so you have your declarations to read. I will be bringing extra copies in case you forget, so don't get all upset if you forget. But if you have yours and can bring it, that would be great. How many of you are planning to go in the water? A lot of you, that's good. Okay, warning, it is cold, so the water will also be cold. So here's the good news, bad news. The bad news is it's going to be about 60, 65 degrees by the time you get in the water, and the water will not be. Here's the good news. You're not doing this in the rain in 45 degrees in Alberta, in a fast-moving stream, okay, which is flooded because of all the rain. Because that's what we witnessed doing not too many months ago. Okay? So that one was, I watched those people, I said, you guys are crazy. And some of them went under and popped up 8 feet over. I'm not kidding. It was because it had been raining a lot and the water was really moving. And so there are people that were like actually diving in against the current so they would kind of almost pop up somewhere in the right place. And it was cold. And I had the only umbrella. Not because I brought one, but somebody was nice enough to stick one over me because I was presiding over the thing. But it was wet and it was cold. So that's the good news, is that you won't have to face those elements. Okay? Now, for those of you who would like to face much more friendly elements and would like to visit Beth Shalom in Tennessee and can come in the summer, we do a picnic and mikvah. We call that a picnic or a miknick, or I don't know, whatever it is. Okay, a picnic and mikvah. And then it will probably be 90 degrees and the water will be quite warm. Okay, so we do that in a nice, beautiful place where it's easy to get into and it works out really great. So you can come and do that with us in the summer. All right, now. And then after we have that, we'll have some family day activities. And what I want you to know is that we're taking a picture. We always take a group picture. We like to take them in the MTOI shirts if you have one. If you don't have one, it's okay. Don't be embarrassed. Come anyway. Get in the picture. It's a family picture. But most of you, I know, have the shirts. It doesn't matter which one you get. We'll have all the colors represented of all the shirts we have. But the new one is the green one. But just wear whatever one you want to wear. It doesn't matter. Okay? We'll be meeting on the deck here, facing the beautiful mountains and everything. We're meeting on the deck at about 5:30 and wanting to get the picture done between 5:30 and 5:45 so that we can be finished in time for supper. Okay? Supper starts at 6. And I know that getting 100 and something people organized for a picture may take 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. So let's try to be here somewhere between 5:30, 5:45, get that picture taken. Okay. And then don't forget, tonight is movie night. By the way, how many of you saw The Miracle this morning? Yeah! How many of you are really confused and don't know what I'm talking about? I heard there was a rabbi sighting at breakfast. Yeah! 8 o'clock. Not quite 8 o'clock, 8:10, but yes, I made it. Okay. And the movie I believe we'll be doing is Fiddler on the Roof. Tradition! Okay. All right. Okay, that's going to cover it on that. So now let's go ahead and talk about how this readings things works. Okay, that's fine. He's not here. All right. So the way this works is I've got 10 readings. So we're just going to fill the chairs up twice. Okay, each person is going to read about 17 verses or so. You may be reading, half a chapter. We're going to go through John's chapters 1 through 4. Okay, we're going to read 4 chapters in the book of John. There are 5 seats up front. They're now occupied. As they empty out, we can put 5 more people in, okay? If you don't get to read today, that's okay. We're doing this for 4 more times. So everybody will get a chance to read who wants to read. It is a special honor and blessing to come up and read, and we will ask a blessing upon you when you do come up to read. If you come up and read, we're not expecting you to be the best reader in the world. We're not surprised if you get choked up. All of those things are okay. You're just coming up to be honoring the word and speaking before your brothers, and however it comes out is good. Amen? Amen. Okay, so if you're afraid of messing up, don't you listen to me teach? I garble every time I read verses too quick. I've messed it up during Passover, during the Seder. Just don't worry about it. Just realize you messed up and say it again. It's no big deal. Okay? So we have the 10 readings. I will tell you from where to where you're reading. If you want, you can bring up your own scripture to read out of. There is a large print, hardcover book up here, nice and easy to read from, that is open already to where you need to be. Okay? So that should be easy enough to do. Okay, I think that should be clear. After we read these 4 chapters, we'll spend the remaining of the time, like we do on Tuesday nights, discussing what we read. Okay? Now, in that discussion, let me rephrase that. See, I already messed up. In the knowing that we're going to discuss this, if, during the reading, you hear something that either you feel compelled that you want to say something about, you have a comment, you have a question, or something that you want to bring into the mix for discussion, you should have something to write down so you can make a note of it. Okay, because we're not going to deal with any of the stuff till we finish reading. We used to try to do it during the reading, and then we found we only got like 1 chapter done out of the 4 because we could get so quick into a discussion, we won't get the rest of it done. Okay? So we're now going to read the whole thing through, and then we'll discuss it. So you may want to take notes. I'm going to be sitting there doing the same thing that I'm asking you to do. This is the note paper that I take notes on. I have notes from last year. I've got notes from every time we've used John. but I like to do it fresh, just like you're doing it. As I hear stuff, and as I'm looking at stuff, whatever I feel compelled I want to talk about or make note of, I'll make note of, just like you are, okay? All right, so that's going to get us started here. Let me... I need somebody to open us in prayer. Okay, Nate, would you like to stand up and open us in prayer?
Avinu Malkeinu, thank you for this wonderful feast. Thank you that you are creator of all, that you thought of us before the foundations of the earth began, that you chose to open up your house to those who would choose to serve you. We thank you and praise you for this day. We thank you and praise you for your word, Yeshua, the Torah, the living Torah. We thank you for this day, and may your blessing be upon all of us who have gathered here to observe this feast to honor you in Yeshua's name.
Amen. Amen. Okay, so when you come up to read, to avoid the challenge we had in years past, I'll move this back a little bit. Okay, this microphone comes out, so we don't have to constantly raise and lower the stand. I used to be sitting there constantly, because we'd always be like someone like Nate, then someone like me, then someone taller than that, and then someone, you know, and I was constantly having to move the thing. So just take the microphone out of the stand, and then you can hold it while you're reading, okay? So we're going to begin with Dawid. Come on up. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Dawid, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Dawid's going to take us in John chapter 1 through verses 1 through 17.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. He was in the beginning with Elohim. All came to be through him, and without him not even one came to be that came to be. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from Elohim, whose name was Yochanan. This one came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all might believe through him. He was not that light, but that he might bear witness of that light. He was the true light, which enlightens every man coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came to be through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the authority to become children of Elohim, to those believing in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the desire of flesh, nor of the desire of man, but of Elohim. And the Word became flesh, and pitched his tent among us, and we saw his esteem as of an only brought forth of a father, complete in favor and truth. Yochanan bore witness of him, and cried out, saying, This was he of whom I said, He who comes after me has become before me, because he was before me. And out of his completeness we all did receive, and favor upon favor. For the Torah was given through Moshe. The favor and the truth came through Yeshua Messiah.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you, Dawid. Okay, next up we have Sam. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Sam, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and then blessings and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Sam's going to take us from verse 18 to verse 36.
No one has ever seen Elohim, the only brought forth Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he did declare. Now this was the witness of Yochanan when the Yehudim sent from Yerushalayim priests and Levites to ask him, Who are you? And he confessed, and did not deny, but confessed, I am not the Messiah. And they asked him, What then are you, Eliyahu? So he said, I am not. Are you the prophet? And he answered, No. Therefore they said to him, Who are you? So that we give an answer to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself? He said, I am a voice of one crying in the wilderness, Make straight the way of Yah, as the prophet Yeshayahu said. And those sent were of the Pharisees. And they asked him, saying, Why then do you immerse if you are not the Messiah, nor Eliyahu, nor the prophet? Yochanan answered them, saying, I immerse in water, but in your midst stands one whom you do not know, the one coming after me, who has become before me, whose sandal strap I am not worthy to loosen. This took place in Beth Anya beyond the Yarden, when Yochanan was immersing. On the next day, Yochanan saw Yeshua coming toward him and said, See, the Lamb of Elohim who takes away the sin of the world. This is he of whom I said, After me comes a man who has become before me, for he was before me. And I did not know him, but that he might be revealed to Yisrael, therefore I came immersing in water. And Yochanan bore witness, saying, I have seen the Spirit coming down from heaven like a dove, and remain on him. And I did not know him, but he who sent me to immerse in water said to me, Upon whom you see the Spirit coming down and remain on him, this is he who immerses in the set-apart Spirit. And I have seen and I have witnessed that this is the Son of Elohim. Again, the following day, Yochanan was standing with two of his taught ones, and looking at Yeshua walking, he said, See, the Lamb of Elohim.
Amen. Amen. All right. Nate. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Nate, who's come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. All right, Nate's going to take us from verse 37 to the end of chapter 1.
And the two taught ones heard him speaking, and they followed Yeshua. And Yeshua, turning and seeing them following, said to them, What do you seek? And they said to him, Rabbi, where are you staying? He said to them, Come and see. They went and saw where he was staying, and remained with him that day. Now it was about the 10th hour. Andri, the brother of Shimon, Kepha, was one of the two who heard from Yochanan and followed him. First he found his own brother Shimon, and said to him, We have found the Messiah, which means the anointed. And he brought him to Yeshua. And looking at him, Yeshua said, You are Shimon, the son of Yonah. You shall be called Kepha, which means stone. On the following day, Yeshua wished to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, Follow me. And Philip with Baya to Sira, the city of Andri and Kepha. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, We have found him whom Moshe wrote of in the Torah and the prophets, Yeshua of Nazareth, the son of Yosef. And Nathanael said to him, Is it possible for any good matter to come out of Nazareth? Philip said to him, Come and see. Yeshua saw Nathanael coming toward him and said to him, See, truly a Yisraeli, in whom is no deceit. Nathanael said to him, From where do you know me? Yeshua answered and said to him, Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. Nathanael answered and said to him, Rabbi, you are the son of Elohim. You are the sovereign of Yisrael. Yeshua answered and said to him, Because I said this to you, I saw you under the fig tree. Do you believe? Greater than that you shall see. And he said to him, Truly, truly, I say to you, from now on you shall see the heaven opened, and the messengers of Elohim ascending and descending upon the Son of Adam.
Amen. Amen. All right, Bob. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Bob, who's come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, John chapter 2, verses 1 through 12.
Thank you. And on the third day, there was a wedding in Canaan of Galilee, and the mother of Yeshua was there. And both Yeshua and his taught ones were invited to the wedding. And when they were short of wine, the mother of Yeshua said to him, They have no wine. Yeshua said to her, Woman, what is that to me and to you? My hour has not yet come. His mother said to the servants, Do whatever he says to you. And there were 6 stone water jugs standing there according to the mode of the cleansing of the Yudam, each holding 2 or 3 measures. Yeshua said to them, "Fill the water jugs with water," and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw out and take it to the master of the feast." So they took it. But when the master of the feast had tasted the water that had become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants had drawn the water, they knew. The master of the feast called the bridegroom, and he said to them, "Every man at the beginning sets out the good wine, and when they have drunk, then that which is poorer, they have kept the good wine until now. This is the beginning of the sign Yeshua did in Canaan of Galilee, and manifested his esteem, and he taught ones believed in him. After this, he went down to Kephar Nahum. He said to his mother and his brothers, and taught ones, and they stayed and not many days. And the Pesach of Yehudan was near, and Yeshua went up to Jerusalem, and he found a set-apart place, those selling oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers sitting.
I was so busy writing notes, I didn't know to stop you.
Yeah, we're on a roll.
You got on a good roll there. Okay.
You said stand up.
That's true. That's true. That's what happened. I got caught writing notes. Excellent job. Thank you, Bob. Okay. All right, Robert. You blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May you bless Robert, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. And we are going to take this now where we were already in 14. So start again in 14 and take that to 25. Okay? 14 to 25.
And he found in the set-apart place those selling oxen and sheep and doves and the money changers sitting. And having made a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the set-apart place with the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the money changers coins and overturned the tables. And he said to those selling doves, "Take these away. Do not make the house of my father a house of merchandise." And his taught ones remembered that it was written, "The ardor of your house has eaten me up." And then the Yehudim answered and said to him, "What sign do you show to us, since you are doing these?" Yeshua answered and said to them, "Destroy this dwelling place, and in 3 days I shall raise it." Then the Yehudim said, "It took 46 years to build this dwelling place, and you are going to raise it in 3 days." But he spoke about the dwelling place of his body. So when he was raised from the dead, his taught ones remembered that he had said this to them, and they believed the scriptures and the word which Yeshua had said. And when he was in Jerusalem at Pesach, at the festival, many believed his name when they saw the signs which he was doing. But Yeshua was not entrusting himself to them, because he knew all men, and had no need that anyone should witness of man, for he knew what was in man.
Thank you. Okay, Pat, come on up. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Pat, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Pat's going to take us now to chapter 3 and read verses 1 through 18. Take the papers out. Here we go. 1 through 18.
And there was a man of the Pharisees, Nicodemus was his name, a ruler of the Yehudim. This one came to you, Yeshua, by night, and said to him, "Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from Elohim, for no one is able to do these signs you do if Elohim is not with him." Yahushua answered and said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born from above, he is unable to see the reign of Elohim." Nicodemus said to him, "How is a man able to be born when he is old? Is he able to enter the mother's womb a second time and be born? Yahushua answered, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and of the Spirit, he is unable to enter the reign of Elohim. That which has been born of the flesh is flesh, and that which has been born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not marvel that I said to you, you have to be born from above. The wind blows where it wishes, you hear the sound of it, but you do not know where it comes from and where it goes. So is everyone who has been born of the Spirit. Nicodemus answered and said to him, How is it possible for this to take place? Yahushua answered and said to him, Are you the teacher of Israel, and you do not know this? Truly, truly, I say to you, we speak what we know and witness what we have seen, and you do not receive our witness. If you do not believe when I spoke to you about the earthly matters, how are you going to believe when I speak to you about the heavenly matters? And no one has gone up into heaven except he who came down from heaven, and the son of Adam. And Moshe lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so the son of Adam has to be lifted up. So whoever is believing in him should not perish, but possess everlasting life. For Elohim so loved the world that he gave his only brought forth Son, so that everyone who believes in him should not perish, but possess everlasting life. For Elohim did not send his Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He who believes in him is not judged, but he who does not believe is judged already, because he has not believed in the name of the only brought forth Son of Elohim.
Amen. Amen. Okay, let's see. I've got one more seat needed to be filled. Well, actually, let's see. No, 1, 2, 3. No, we're perfect. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So instead of going first, like you usually do, you get to go last. There you go. All right. David, he who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless David, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, David, take us from verse 19 to the end of chapter 3. Here's the mic.
And this is the judgment that the light has come into the world, and men love the darkness rather than the light, for their works were wicked. And everyone who is practicing evil matters hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. But the one doing the truth comes to the light, so that his works are clearly seen, that they have been wrought within Elohim. After this, Yahweh and Yeshua and his taught ones came into the land of Yehuda, and he remained there with them and was immersing. And Yohanan was also immersing in Ain near Salem, because there was plenty of water there. And they were coming and were being immersed, for Yohanan had not been put into prison. Then a dispute arose between some of Yohanan's taught ones and the Yehudim about cleansing. And they came to Yohanan and said to him, Rabbi, he who is with you beyond the Yarden, with whom you have witnessed, see, he is immersing, and all are coming to him. Yohanan answered and said, No man is able to receive any matter unless it is given him from the heaven. You yourselves are witnesses for me that I said, I am not the Messiah, but I am sent ahead of him. He that is the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly because of the voice of the bridegroom. So this is joy of mine is complete. It is right for him to increase, but me to decrease. He who comes from above is over all. He who is from the earth is of the earth and speaks of the earth. He who comes from the heaven is over all. And what he has seen and heard that he witnesses, and no one receives his witness. He who receives his witness has set his seal that Elohim is true. For he whom Elohim has sent speaks the words of Elohim. For Elohim does not give the Spirit by measure. The Father loves the Son and has given all into his hand. He who believes in the Son possesses everlasting life, but he who does not obey the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of Elohim remains on him.
Thank you, David. Okay, Amy. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Amy, who's come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Amy's going to take us now to chapter 4 and read verses 1 through 18.
So when the master knew that the Pharisees had heard that Yeshua made and immersed more taught ones than Yochanan, although Yeshua himself did not immerse, but his taught ones, he left Yehuda and went away to Galilee, and he had to pass through Shomeron. So he came to a city of the Shomeron called Shechem, near the piece of land Yaakov gave to his son Joseph. And Yaakov's fountain was there. So Yeshua, being wearied from the journey, was sitting thus at the fountain. It was about the 6th hour. A woman of Shomeron came to draw water. Yeshua said to her, "Give me to drink," for his taught ones had gone off to the city to buy food. The woman of Shomeron therefore said to him, "How is it that you, being a Yehudi, ask a drink from me, a woman of Shomeron? For Yehudim do not associate with Shomeronim." Yeshua answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of Elohim and who it was who says to you, 'Give me to drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Master, you have no vessel, and the well is deep. From where then do you have living water? Are you greater than our father Yaakov, who gave us this well and drank from it himself and his sons and his cattle?" Yeshua answered and said to her, "Everyone drinking of this well shall thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water I give him shall certainly never thirst. And the water that I give him shall become in him a fountain of water, springing up into everlasting life." The woman said to him, "Master, give me this water so that I do not thirst, nor come here to draw." Yeshua said to her, "Go, call your husband and come here." The woman answered and said, "I have no husband." Yeshua said to her, "You have well said, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true."
Yeah, it seems to me like having a discussion with Yeshua could be a little tricky. You better not try to say something not true or bend it a little bit, because he's going to know. All right. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Santi, who's come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Santi, verse 19 through 38.
The woman said to him, "Master, I see that you are a prophet. Our father worship on this mountain, but you people say that in Jerusalem is a place where one needs to worship." Yeshua said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you shall neither do on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, because the deliverance is of the Judean. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father also does seek such to worship him. Elohim is spirit, and those who worship him need to worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, the one who is called Anointed. When that one comes, he shall anoint to us all." Yeshua said to her, "I, who am speaking to you, am he." And upon this, his taught ones came, and they were marveling that he was speaking with the woman. However, no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why do you speak with her?" The woman then left her water jar and went away to the city and said to the man, "Come, see a man who told me all that I have done. Is this not the Messiah?" they went out of the city and were coming to him. But in the meantime, his thoughts once were asking him, saying, Rabbi, eat. And he said to them, I have food to eat of which you do not know. Then the thought once said to each other, Did anyone brought him food to eat? Yeshua said to them, My food is to do the desire of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Do you not say, There are still 4 months, and the harvest comes? See, I say to you, lift up your eyes and see the fields, for they are white for harvest already. He who is reaping receives a reward and gathers fruit for everlasting life, so that both he who is sowing and he who is reaping rejoice together. For in this word is true, one sows and other reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you have not labored, others have labored, and you have entered into their labors.
Amen. All right, thank you, Santi. All right, now we spoke about tradition a little bit when we were talking about the movie tonight. Well, one of the traditions for the last couple of years is that Trey, hi Trey, has always been the first reader. Today he didn't get here in time, but he'll get to be our last reader today. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Trey, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Trey, take us from verse 39 to the end of chapter 4.
And many of the Shamamim of that city believed in him because of the word of the woman who witnessed. He told me all that I have done. Therefore, when the Shamronian came to him, they were asking him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his word. And they said to the woman, We no longer believe because of what you said, for we ourselves have heard, and we know that this is truly the Messiah, the Savior of the world. And after the 2 days, he left there and went to Galilee, for Yeshua himself witnessed that a prophet is without appreciation in his own country. Therefore, when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the festival, for they also went to the festival. Then Yeshua came again to Canaan of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Yeshua had come from Yehuda and into Galilee, he went to him and was asking him to come down and heal his son, for he was about to die. Yeshua then said to him, If you people do not see signs and wonders, you do not believe at all. The nobleman said to him, Master, come down before my child dies. Yeshua said to him, Go to your son, for he lives. And the man believed the word that Yeshua spoke to him and went. And while he was going down, his servants met with him and reported, saying, Your son lives. He then asked from them the hour which he became better. And they said to him, Yesterday, at the 7th hour, the inflammation left him. Then the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Yeshua said to him, Your son lives. And he himself believed, and all of his household. Again, this was the second sign Yeshua did, when he had come down from Yehuda into Galilee.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you, Trey. Thank you, all the readers. Appreciate that. Give me 1 second to finish writing this last note I was just writing about what was being read. Okay, good. All right, I don't know how you did with notes. I've got a whole bunch of them here myself. And so I really appreciate the readers. It's one thing to study the word. It's another thing to sit here together as a group and hear the word read out loud, isn't it? It's just very powerful. And what I'm realizing is not so powerful, I'm realizing is my eyes. I need my glasses. Hold on. I'm looking at all you got, and I just can't see anything. Here we go. Much better. Okay, I'm going to need someone to take around a microphone, Kurt or Zarek, because Zarek is coming around. Okay, HH. 2 is sitting right here on the table by the projector. Okay. I think in a room this size, it might be better to get me a separate mic. Well, we don't have any more mics extra, huh? And take around 2 wireless. This is fine. Do you want to put my headset on and we can have 2 wireless go? No, you know what? It's going to take too much for me to put that on. We'll just go this way. Never mind. All right, so this is the way it works. We're going to have a discussion now of what we read. Okay, and in reading, all right, I guess if you want to just give it to me, I'll get it hooked up pretty quick. We have a second mic. Okay, Dawid, take the mic. I'll be right back. Okay, test, test. Where did I put my glasses? All right. All right. Is that okay? We're good? Awesome, because I think it'd be good to have a mic on each side of the room. Good. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. Shh. Okay, we just read 4 chapters of the book of Yochanan, the book of John. And so we're going to try to we'll do this each day. We're going to try to take what we read in a somewhat chronological order so that we can go in a logical fashion to follow the flow of what we just read to make sure that we're getting it in the right flow of how it was said. Okay, I'm just going to try and click this onto the back of my shirt here so it doesn't fly around. Okay, there we go. Okay, and so we're going to begin here in John chapter 1. Now, we don't have to be strict in our keeping it chronological, but let's do the best we can to kind of go in a chronological order. And so if you have a comment or question, I'm going to kind of lay the ground rules here. Okay, you can raise your hand. We'll bring the mic around. If you're on a live stream, we'll try to also take those comments and questions as well and get them and get you involved as best we can. But now here's what we're doing. It's not just a you asking me type of session. It's kind of like we do this on Tuesday nights as well when we do the Torah studies. If somebody says something or asks a question, all of you are also welcome to raise your hand to try to get involved in that discussion if you'd like. Okay, so but be patient. If you have your hand up, before I go to you, I may ask you, is it on the same topic we're talking about, or are you wanting to change the topic? So if you're wanting to change the topic, I may make you wait a minute until we make sure we've had everybody cover the first one first. Okay, we good on that? Okay, those are the ground rules. Okay, who would like to get us started? Okay, Nate's got his hand up. So here comes the mic.
I just thought it was interesting in chapter 1. We're down in verses 19 through 23. Basically, in our culture today, when people see the tzitzits on my pants and they ask you, are you a Jew? Are you Jewish now? They always want to try to find a label, a box to put us in. And I just thought it humorous. I was like, oh, nothing is really that different as it was back in that day. They were trying to put a label on Yochanan to try to figure out who he was. And I really liked his answer. Of course, I will always say I'm an Israelite, a Messianic Torah observant Israelite, but I was like, oh, well, that's what John said. The voice of one crying in the wilderness makes straight the path of Elohim.
Amen. Amen. Okay, which is a quote out of Isaiah. Now, the interesting thing also here, and I'm going to put in some tidbits and some little comments also as we get through it. Did you have a comment on what Nate just said, or do you have something else?
No, I had to comment on what Nate said.
Okay, go ahead.
The park we're in Florida, in Jacksonville, one of the manager's husband is an Israeli, and he saw me with my tzitzits. He said, you know what those are? And I said, yes, I do. He says, I do too. He says, that means you're my brother.
Awesome. 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 Anybody else on the comment on what Nate was just talking about? Okay, no. All right, so let me just throw in something. Who are you pointing at? No, but Sam's got another question. No. I already got that covered here. Okay, I saw that Sam said, no, he's got a different topic. Okay. Yeah, stand up when you're talking to make it a lot easier for the live streamers. What I wanted to point out here in verse 21 is that they asked him, what then? Are you Eliyahu? Are you the prophet? Now, the prophet question kind of makes sense, meaning they were looking for the prophet that Moses says there will be a prophet like unto me that's going to be greater, etc. You're going to listen to him. But they asked him if he was Elijah. So let's understand that this is not unique today with all of the belief system confusion, because they were clearly believing in reincarnation. So don't find that so strange that people today believe in things like reincarnation. I'm not endorsing that at all. I'm simply saying they wouldn't ask this question if they didn't believe in those things. And you see this come up in a couple of places in the Gospels where they say they think Yeshua is Elijah or Isaiah or somebody, right? They're like, who is he? So there is this reincarnation sort of thing that plays through to some degree with some of the sects of Judaism at the time. And the Messianics were actually just one of those many different flavors of Judaism initially, okay? Because just like we see how many denominations of Christianity today, we know that the Jews have a few. They have a lot more than you think, but they're really, really small, so you don't hear about them very much. But not like Christianity, which has a lot that you know about. I mean, there's so many different flavors. And then even within a particular one, there's lots of flavors of that one. Okay, because not all Baptists are the same as all Baptists, or Charismatics the same as Charismatics. It's very different. So I want you to see that nothing has really changed in terms of that. There were people even back here that it wasn't just Sadducees and Pharisees, but there was lots of different belief systems going on. The biggest were ones that we hear about, as we would today. The biggest ones is what you would hear about, but there's a lot of smaller ones as well. Just wanted to kind of throw that in there so you realize, oh, you know what, today is not so different than then. Today's not so different. They were dealing with some of the same things we're dealing with. Actually, mostly they were dealing with the same stuff we deal with today. Okay, Sam, go ahead.
In chapters 24 through 26 of chapter 1, I'm just curious, given the way that's worded, is it something along the lines of authority that they're questioning with Yochanan, or is there possibly some actual difference between the immersion he was doing versus the typical immersion that would be being done by their end? Right.
That was actually the part B of what you said is what was going on. They were looking for someone to do a very specific type of immersion. And so based on what he was doing, they were trying to label him. Because, we got to remember, they also, like us, were anticipating and awaiting and wanting for the arrival of the Mashiach. And so anytime anybody started doing some things that kind of sounded like or looked like, they wondered, I wonder if this is the one. I wonder if that is the one. We still see these things today. People, acclaiming someone as Mashiach. All right, so here, that's what's going on, and they're talking about a type of baptism. Now, we're going to see in, look at my notes. Where's the verse? Okay, in the, let's see, at the end of the chapter, right, 24 and 25. So that's in chapter 2 now, where he's going to explain the baptism. But since we brought it up, let's go there now. In chapter 3 and verse 5, okay, Yeshua is saying, truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and spirit. So now he's going to try to explain this whole thing. He said, you're going to have to be baptized. You got to be, what's the whole point of baptism? Okay, changing of state. Thank you. Good, Aubrey. Okay, changing of state. And that changing of state here also has the idea of a new life, a burying of an old man, etc. So he says, unless one starts fresh, changes their state from what? From tameh to tahor, unclean to clean. He says, and unless they do that, and, what does he say? He says, born of water and spirit. Okay, so what do we talk about with spirit? That's where we get the knowledge, the information, the relationship. We talked about this in the baptism of fire teaching, right? There's the baptism of water and spirit and fire. So water is starting fresh. Spirit is being infused with the instructions and guidance of what you're supposed to now be doing. Fire tests to see how much you've embraced it. Very simple. It's not what you were taught in Sunday school, but very simple, okay? And so you see those things kind of playing out. So they were wondering what John was doing and what his baptism was for. He says, no, mine is just your simple, repentance, change, tamei tahor, change of state. I'm going to walk this right and do better. But the one who you're really waiting for is going to baptize you in spirit and in fire. He's coming. He's coming, and that's the one that we're waiting for. And so then we get introduced to Yeshua in this process. Of course, John chapter 1 gives us sort of the whole thing in the first 15 or 20 verses, and then it starts to break it down in smaller chunks. So here's your overview, all the way from the beginning of time. Right? John chapter 1 and verse 1 goes all the way to the beginning before there was time, actually. Before anything existed, there was just the Word and the Father, and they were together. Okay, the Father and Son, and then these things all came about. And so that's a huge process that's going on there. I don't want to jump in. Does anybody else have stuff in chapter 1 or before I fill in some things? Okay, chapter 1. So, okay, Pat, go ahead. What? If the light's on, it's off. So just push the button.
This was a comment just on the tzitzit. It's a commandment, right?
The tzitzit?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And there are some Messianic congregations that the leaders don't wear tzitzit. So I guess they're just not.
They're just wrong. I'm sorry, was that too subtle? You know me, I'm very subtle. But this is part of the problem, okay? We have in the body, and we've talked about this over and over again. Unfortunately, the body is being taught by untrained, there's no discipleship. So Yeshua didn't go, hey, you guys follow me, and then immediately turn around and send them out, did he? No, he trained them first, right? And when they were trained and ready, he sent them out. But we've got a lot of people self-anoint, self-appoint, and start ministries, or they come right out of other ministries when they were in Christianity and just maintained their microphone, and now they just changed the, Sunday to Saturday and Christmas and Easter to the feasts, and they stopped eating pork. They think they're good. But doctrinally and positionally, they've not truly embraced and understood. So they don't wear tzitzit. And they don't think anybody needs to. And they don't have a problem if you go to restaurants and do other things on Shabbat and maybe have to work. I've been in congregations where the head elder missed half the services because he worked on Saturdays. I'm saying, how in the world are you the head elder? But he was. Great guy. Tremendous person. But just not getting the need to actually commit to do the covenant. What's the covenant? Yahweh says it, we do it. Did he say to wear tzitzit? Yes. So we do it. And so when you see leadership not doing it, it ought to tell you the level and place where that leadership is in their walk. We have a lot of, we talk about the elementary school model, right? Okay, in elementary school, you have grades 1 through 8 or whatever it is, and you go all the way up to 12 with high school, and then you have college. And my relating this is that someone who's been doing this 3 or 4 years is like a 3rd or 4th grader. And so generally you wouldn't go to a 3rd or 4th grader to learn how to do anything. Because why? They're just beginning to learn themselves. They don't know how to do anything. What they do know, they know kind of, sort of. Okay? Maybe enough to handle some basic things, but they really don't know what they're doing in 3rd and 4th grade. We're actually fortunate if people graduate college and have any idea what they're doing. Okay, but yet in the body, most of the guys out there who are teaching, most of us are learning, I shouldn't say most of us who are teaching, most of the guys who are out there teaching, and most of the ones who are learning from people who essentially have been doing this less than 5 years. And were trained by nobody. Or they were trained by other people that was doing it less than 5 years. And guess what you get? Okay, a mess. A big mess. All right? Look, we used to have this whole idea, and I'll use a metaphor. When I was in the martial arts, okay, let's say I was the teacher, the sensei, and you were my student, and I was a 5th degree black belt. Okay, and let's say I trained you all the way to black belt, but that's all I got you to was 1st degree black belt, and then you went out and started teaching. So now you're missing some stuff, aren't you? I didn't get you all the way to what I know. So you haven't gotten everything I know yet. And then you start teaching, and then you have a second student. You have another student now. You were my student, and you have a student. That student, you teach them, and they only get to brown belt or some lower level belt, and then they go out and start a school. And you see how it keeps getting watered down. Each one learns or is missing more and more pieces. Imagine what it gets to 3 or 4 generations down. Okay? That's the problem when we don't have proper discipleship. Now, we are not going to be able to do true discipleship because we have lost that chain directly from Mashiach. So Abba's bringing it back in the best that he has with what he's doing. He's anointing a few people. Hopefully those people have that kind of information that they need in the training, and then they can properly disciple the next ones. But that's what we have, is a lot of people that are incomplete in their training, if they have any at all, who are out there teaching everybody else. And then what happens is, because they're missing pieces, guess what's missing pieces are filled in with? Well, the default stuff they already knew from before. All the gaps are going to be filled in with what they knew before. And that's where you get Mesa Costal, Mesa Baptist, Mesa, whatever flavor you want to stick in there. It's Messianic plus wherever they came from before. Okay? And you recognize this because if you were one of those denominations and that teacher was also, you'll start to feel either comfortable or uncomfortable because you're going to recognize it. Okay? If you're new, it may make you comfortable because it's familiar. If you've been here around long enough, it may make you uncomfortable because you realize you didn't want all that. But you'll recognize it. Now, if it's very Baptist and you're coming from a different place, you might not recognize it. The Baptists would. If it's charismatic and you weren't charismatic, you might not recognize it, but the charismatics would. You see what I'm saying? You'll recognize because you were there. You experienced it. You know, you come from that same place. All right? You have the same context. And so this is a problem what we have going on, is the training is not done that way. And then we end up with a tremendous mess. So then I get phone calls from people like Pat who say, well, I was at this congregation and they're doing this. And I have to sit there going, ay. I don't know what to tell them because they almost wish that I would somehow get involved and make it stop or fix it or something, but there's no authority for me to do that, right? See, now within MTOI, those who voluntarily submit themselves under this structure and are affiliated, I could maybe say, hey, what's going on over there? Maybe we need to fix a few things. But generally speaking, most of these guys who are out there are under no covering whatsoever. And so there isn't anybody to straighten them out. And that's part of the reason why the thing is such a mess. And that's why Yeshua has to show up. It's not going to get fixed till he does. And he has to come with his rod of iron and knock a few heads and get everybody lined up. In the meantime, some of us can try to work this out in smaller organizations and ways, and that's what we're hoping to do a little bit with MTOI. We're trying to bring some sanity into the thing, okay? And so that's where we're at. Okay, so who's next? Okay, Hugo?
So I guess this is more of a comment. I am so... the congruence that comes through even in the beginning of John 1, there verse 3 and 4 hit me this morning. All came to be through him, that is Yeshua, and without him, Yeshua, the Word, not even one came to be that came to be. In him was life. Just how congruent that is with elsewhere, like what came to mind was 2 Corinthians 5. For Elohim was in Messiah, reconciling the world to himself. And in Colossians somewhere it says, in him all the fullness of the mightiness of Elohim dwells. And Hebrews 1 verse 3, he, Yeshua, who is the exact representation of the Father. You know, just this little phrase, in him, and then connecting to Yeshua's words in John 4 that we also read, Elohim is spirit. So the fullness of Elohim, who is spirit, was in Messiah. It's just so awesome to me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so he just summarized 11 parts of Do You Know the Father and the Son in like a minute and a half. Good job. Okay, now here's part of the problem. Okay, here's part of the problem for people, is that we have a lot of people that are going, the phrase one of my friends in the leadership places have mentioned, the idea of going over the bridge. We'll call it, I'm going to use my friend Curtis Reed's analogy of being in the river is where Yeshua is, and you got river banks on the side of the river, and on one side of the river is more that whole Christianity mess, and the other side is the Judaism mess. And we're supposed to be in the river with him. Problem is, he calls it like a flying fox. Hey, that really is weird, a flying fox. And they chase the flying fox onto one of the river banks. And they forget to stop and stay in the river. They come off one river bank and end up in the other one. And because people can't reconcile this idea that it says all came to be through him, and without him, not even anything came to be, that's how you understand who was dealing with the Israelites, who was dealing with all of human beings in the Old Testament. They don't know how to reconcile Isaiah in places where it says, there is no Elohim but me, when Yahweh says these things. The whole Father and Son teaching explains how Yeshua is the one they dealt with, not the Father. Not directly, okay? And they're still not dealing with him directly here when he says, no one has seen the Father. He says, in verse 18, it says, no one has ever seen Elohim, the only brought forth Son. He is in the bosom of the Father, and he did declare. So he's saying that no one has seen. So then who did they see? Who had lunch with Abraham? Who did Moses ask to see his fullness of his, and he put him in the cleft of the rock? Who was all of that? See, if you can't reconcile this, you could end up in full-blown just Judaism. Because the whole New Testament hangs on and really is predicated on, if you dig into it and study it, on understanding who Yeshua is relative to the whole book. And John 1, right there in verse 3, that has to be dealt with. So if Yeshua is not the one that we read in the Old Testament doing all those things, then we have a problem. Because the Old Testament tells us we'd have a problem. And even the New Testament says that he is the one that it all came to be through. That doesn't go into this oneness doctrine that somehow the Father is the Son or the Son is the Father. Okay? Yeshua isn't talking to himself when he says Father and he prays to him and says Father and he prays to him. Okay? Telling them they want to introduce him to the Father. Clearly there's at least two entities. Okay? I don't think there's any more. We do that in the teaching and we explain things.
The way I reconcile that is Yahweh was in the Spirit. He took on flesh. He took on an earthly name, Yeshua. Doesn't mean they're two different people. He just, in the body, in the flesh, he had a name, Yeshua. Came back to Spirit, he's back to Yahweh. Is that correct?
Only if you still include that there's a separate being also known as the Father.
Well,
okay.
yes, I'm trickling.
Okay, so as long as we understand that there's two, the one here that's called the Word in verse 1, then we go into, Kurt's explanation was very good. Okay, so we take that Word, because remember it says Elohim is spirit, so the Word was spirit with Elohim. Then that Word put on flesh, John 1:14, and dwelled among us, and then was resurrected and was raised to be back up where he started, made the full cycle. But that's still only talking about the entity that's called here the Word. There's another entity that the Word came to introduce us to, known as the Father. That doesn't mean that the Word had not been like a father to them in the form interacting with Israel in the Tanakh. And so people say, well, how can there be two fathers? Look, I have a son. I'm his father. I have a father. He's my father. Why is it so hard for people? There's a reason why they use the analogy father and son. By the way, they're not literally, this is going to get me called blasphemous here, they're not literally father and son. To be that as we understand it, there would have been a father and a mother and some sort of sexual interaction and the birthing of a baby. We don't have that here. What we have as father and son is the closest relationship that they can use to explain their relationship. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're not talking about a literal, the way we understand it, but the way they relate to each other, the respect for the higher authority. Their relationship is the perfect embodiment of what a father-son relationship should look like. So that's the way they express themselves to us so that we can understand. Okay, so that's the best way that we can understand it, that the way they function and the way they are is best understood in this idea of father and son. Okay, now, so I appreciate that you brought that out. In the beginning of this chapter, though, we also have some confusion that I want to show you that also is part of the problem with all scripture reading. We can easily be confused who's being talked about when because the writer doesn't necessarily tell us as they change. Look at verse 7.
It said, well, actually, verse 6. There was a man sent by Elohim named Yochanan. So we know who we're talking about. Initially, we're talking about some guy named Yochanan, John. This one, Yochanan, came for a witness to bear witness of the light. Okay, the light is a second person, that all might believe through him. Which him? Yochanan or the light? The light. He was not the light, Yochanan, but that he might bear witness of that light. He was the true light which enlightens, not Yochanan. Now he's talking about the light. Just make sure we're keeping things. You see how that could easily get a little confused if you don't slow down, pause, and go, wait a minute, let's make sure. Because when we're looking at a lot of Paul's writings in other places, when we've talked about things like the law of sin and death versus the law of righteousness and things, if you don't follow what he'd already been talking about and what he's currently talking about in relation, you could easily jump to a wrong conclusion. Because he doesn't pause and put nice, clean, flowing, this one is what I'm talking about, and I'm shifting to this one. He could have said that Yochanan, John, came for a witness to bear witness of the light. And then he could have said that Yochanan, was not that light, but that he might bear witness of that light. That light, the person that's coming, this witness, is the true light which enlightens every man. He was in the world, and the world came to be through him. He, not Yochanan, but the light was in the world. And the light that came into the world, let's see, let there be light, was the beginning of everything. And the world came to be through him. So now he's referring him back to being that Yahweh. But he says the world did not have a relationship with him. Not that they didn't know him. They didn't have that relationship. They didn't have that really knowing thing that we talk about. He said, but he came to his own, and his own did not receive him. When it says he came to his own, it's not talking about, this is where Christianity and other groups can mess us up. He didn't go to the Jews, or he didn't go to the Israelites, and he went to all that he created, and what he created didn't really want him. Okay, does that make it more clear? He came to everyone, and what he created didn't really receive him. That's why he said that he grieved in Genesis 6 and said, I grieve and wish I never made these guys. So I'm going to just wipe them all out and start again. He says, however, now as we go through this, he said that he came to his own, they didn't receive him, but as many as did, in other words, there were a few. As many as did, to them he gave authority to be children of Elohim. To those believing in his authority. Let's be careful with that word name. Those who believe in his authority. Those who were actually submissive to and a part of his authority. That is the key here. But you can see how if you don't catch the flow, you can miss this. Now, all of you hopefully knew this already. We've talked about this many times. But I want you to see that trap that's not only here, but in lots of places throughout Scripture, especially in the New Testament, where we could forget what the issue is that's being talked about, or of two issues being compared, which one is being talked about at each moment. Is it talking about the law of sin and death? Is it talking about the law of Torah? Because when Paul starts dealing this whole thing about the law is no good, or the law, be careful which law he's talking about. And don't just go with the default where you fill in the gap through your previous experience, with it being the Torah was no good, the Torah was done away, all the stuff that's just not true. Because we're not watching the context and the flow correctly. So here was an example of that here at the beginning of the chapter. Okay? And so it's very important that we see that. Let's see if there's something else here. And anybody else still in chapter 1? Same subject. Okay, Sharon?
I just wanted to mention the fact that when they asked Yeshua to teach us to pray, he directed them to the Father. Mm-hmm. He didn't tell them to pray to him.
Exactly.
So that right there shows you that they are different.
And of course, in the twisted sort of, and I don't mean twisted like in a sick way, but I mean in the twisted, taking something, just kind of taking it a little bit out of sorts and bending or twisting it, you see how Christianity in general prays to who? The Son. Okay? And he said, I want you to pray to the Father. I came to show you the Father. But all their focus has shifted to the Son. Okay? And he's tried to teach them and talk to them not to do that. Do not do that. Right? Pat.
I just want to make a comment. Elohim is plural. So that includes the Father, the Son,
Okay, Elohim being a plural understanding. I understand that, absolutely.
And also, when you said in verse 7, it says, this one came for a witness to bear witness of the light, and all that might be lead through him. And you said him was the light, right?
Well, actually, in this case, it could be both.
Okay.
He came to witness the light, but really, remember, is that he came to witness the light that all might believe the light eventually. He said, look, he prepared them to listen to the light.
Yeah.
Remember, when he was witnessing, he said, when this guy comes, you need to listen to him.
Oh, okay.
So it also could be talking about himself here. Again, this is one of those ambiguous things. You got to be careful.
It's just that, like it says him, and it's I would think it would be capital, but it's not a capital. And
it's not, well, but here's, again, remember, capitals are not put in by whoever's translating. But what is the consistent word and message you get throughout the whole New Testament? That all might believe through who? Yeshua. So that's the message all throughout the New Testament. So I would feel more comfortable saying that John was trying to get people to understand that they need to believe through Yeshua. That he was witnessing, because all he said was, this guy's coming, you need to listen to him. He's the one. I'm just getting the way prepared for that. Okay? I'm not trying to get you to believe because I said so. I want you to be ready to listen to him and believe because he said so. So the arbitrary nature of the translators, like also we talked about this in one of the last parts of What Are You Thinking, where the word Torah is translated in the Scriptures version, where I think that's a mistake. Because they're guessing which law is being talked about there, and they sometimes, I think, got it wrong. So rather than putting the word Torah in just because that's the one you would prefer it to be, where the word law, all it says in Greek everywhere is nomos, or law, or some grammatical version of of nomos. And so sometimes it is referring to the Torah, sometimes it's not. And so the translators, thinking they're helping, are putting in what they think belongs there. Okay? So they also are arbitrarily capitalizing letters or not. They're also arbitrarily doing whatever they do, because in Greek and in Hebrew there aren't any capitals. All right? So there's no way for that to be except something we arbitrarily do when we put in English. All right? Anybody else on chapter 1? Hugo?
Just as a follow-on, and using them and they to refer to Elohim, I must confess that I struggle with that in the sense that how many thrones are there in heaven? My understanding is there's only one. And also, you have taught before, how frequently is the singular he used of Elohim as opposed to them and they. Or I, when he speaks about himself, it's me, I. Yes, there is a few times us and we, granted. So, but just the balance, is it about 95, 98% singular male as opposed to plural? Personally, the only place I have found that anybody refers to Elohim in the plural is Psalm 2, when it talks about the sovereigns who do not want to submit themselves to Elohim, and says, let us put off their bonds, the Father and his Messiah. So I agree, obviously there is Father and Son, but in my view then the echadness is way more than is sometimes easy to process, that they are so one that there's only one throne, and that it is mostly talked about he and I, and very few times we, and just about never they and them.
Okay, I'm going to agree with the idea that there's a struggle here. I'm going to disagree with almost everything you said, though. Okay, and Zara, can you grab my water bottle? It's right by the offering box there. Okay, it doesn't just say not only we, not only everywhere, but you have to remember that almost everywhere when it does it in what you see as a singular, because it's referring to one of the two. Okay, in Genesis 1, we just see Elohim. In Genesis 2, we see, and we're introduced to the Yahweh Elohim. So now we're referring to a member of this thing called Elohim. Now, I will go to, what I agree with you is that in 1 John, John says, look, we don't know exactly what all that is all about, except we know that when we're like him, we'll see him as he is, and then we'll fully get it. So I understand the struggle with this, but let's be careful. There's one throne because it's clear everywhere that Yeshua is sitting at the right hand. He says, my Father is greater than I. That doesn't diminish the fact that there are two, and they're both referred to as Elohim. We are called human beings, right? Well, what if there was only two of them? We'd still be called human beings. And both of us would still be called human beings, but there's only two of us. They're called Elohim. There's only two of them. But they're referred to in that species, denomination, whatever you call that existence, there's only two. And it includes, when they say Elohim, both, unless it's referring to one or the other specifically. And so this is what we have to be careful with. Elohim is generally used as a catch-all for all things worshipped by anybody. And so we're told by Yahweh, I am your Elohim. Okay? So whether we look at it as plural or not, it's only referring to two at the most at the moment. Except it's going to, when we are changed, guess what we're going to be? Elohim. Because that substance that makes us Elohim is that corruptible, being turned into incorruptible, changes from human or flesh into Elohim. But we're not going to be sitting on the throne, the Father will. And actually, on another throne here on earth, the Son will. Okay, you have the heavenly throne, and then so there's the top. And Yeshua will still sit on the throne here on earth for 1,000 years, ruling and reigning. But as he always says in the Word, he's completely submissive to his Father. Okay, it says in here, one of the words we read, he says that, he did and does only what his Father says. Okay? I mean, we're going to see in other places, it's his obedience and submission to Father. And so this is the important thing. But yet we're also told in 3:36, John 3:36, but he who does not obey the Son shall not see life. So there is authority and there is structures. All right? You've seen kingdom things like in the histories of the world, the stuff that happened like in the British Empire where you'd have the king, but then there were other smaller kingdoms under that king. They all had thrones. And so our struggle here, which I understand, and I'm okay with that struggle, is we're trying to understand like an amoeba understanding a human being. I get that. Okay? But let's be careful where we get too caught up in, well, the word is plural, the word is singular. Because I could also hear the Jews saying, well, it's the royal we. So now they're back to only one. Because when we want to say it's plural, that's a trap. When we want to say single, it's a trap. Okay? So let's be careful we don't fall into the trap by having to label all that. Let's just stick to, we know there's a Father and a Son. The Father is bigger, greater. Yeshua tells us that. He says, my Father is greater than I. Everything he says, I do. I don't do anything he doesn't tell me to do. That kind of gives you a pretty clear picture of who's in charge. However, we also know the Son is going to rule and reign. So he also has an authority. We talk about this through the discipleship teachings, the idea of that everybody at some point needs to realize that you're in the middle. Okay? You have those that are your responsibility and you have authority over, and those that you are being cared for and provided for that you are submitted under. Everybody's in the middle except one, the Father. Yeshua's in the middle. He's under the Father's complete authority, and he has those that he cares for and has authority over. Okay? So it's not that I don't agree with you per se. I just be careful of that trap. When we try to put the labels on there, this is plural, this is singular, we really could fall back into some of these other ways of thinking that are will make it more confused. Let's just stick with Elohim describes all those in that, we'll call it a species. Okay? Not that, because obviously the Creator created all the species, but in whatever that Elohim is, there's only two that have that level of existence. Okay, from the beginning, those are the only two with that level of being. And there is a structure to it, Father, Son, higher, one's lower. Okay? Just like there's a certain amount of those of us out there that are called human beings. There's others that are called dogs, cats, elephants, birds, fish, whatever, right? Okay? So that is the whole picture that we need to embrace. But the key here in John 1 is to realize that the one being talked about in John 1 must also be the one talked about in Tanakh, or we have a big problem. We have idolatry. We've got all kinds of problems. Which is why, the whole point I was trying to make is why people run over the bridge or cross they catch a flying fox into Judaism.
because they can't reconcile that this one in the New Testament is not somehow in conflict with the fact that the Old Testament says there's one. Because Yahweh says very clearly in Isaiah, in chapter 41, 43, 45, in different places, I am the Savior, there is no other. I am Yahweh, there's no other but me. Okay? There's all of these I, nobody else deals. And I explained that in the Father and Son teaching. Now, of course, if that explanation doesn't work for you, you probably need to end up in Judaism, because that's the only explanation that makes it work in the New Testament. If you're going to actually read it and follow it through and understand how there can be more than one, but yet there's one in the Old Testament that says, I did it all myself. Well, here it says, all that came to be through him, and without him, nothing came to be. And so my sort of explanation is that the Father and Son had a conversation before this all began, and the Son was like, hey, I've got this idea. I want to create this whole thing. I got a project I want to do. And so the Father said, that's no problem, but I want you to make sure you understand the whole process here, because the Father knows the end from the beginning, and said, look, if you do this, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and then if you really want this to work out, are you willing to then die for them? I have to be willing to let you. And I mean, they had this whole discussion, I believe. This is my delusion. Because it says all of this was done before the foundation of the world, right? Yeshua was slain even before the foundation of the world. In other words, that was already agreed to. And so then once that was agreed to, I believe the Father said, however, once you create this thing, I can't interact with it because I have a higher level of existence even than you do, and I cannot interact with sin or death. This is going to be yours until you finish and clean it all up, Revelation 21, a new heaven, new earth, and no more sin and no more death. End of chapter 20 in Revelation, sin and death thrown in the lake of the fire, it's all cleaned up. Everything now is tahor. Guess who shows up in Revelation 21? Both the Father and the Son. But I believe that both start in Genesis 1, before there's any sin or death, putting it together. Son, I'll help you get it started. This is like any other father would do. Hey, come here, I'll help you get it started, but this is your project. I believe you got this under control. Go do it. I will still guide you and instruct you from up here. Because he says, my Father still tells me what to do and where I'm going, gives me my guidance, but this is my project. I have to do it. Many a father said to their son, you can ask me questions and I will give you guidance, but this is your project. You need to do this. Okay? Fathers have said that to their sons forever. Where fathers looked at the son and said, I'm not doing this for you. You can do this. Do it yourself, but come and ask questions when you need to. Why would that be any different with them? The relationship is father and son. Okay? And then the whole rest of the time you have Yahweh talking to his creation, this being the Son, saying, I made you. There's nobody else that's going to save you. When he said there's no other Savior, he's like, stop looking to Egypt to save you, or to Rome to save you, or to this guy to save you. That he says, I'm the one who brought you here. You're my project. You're my children. You're my creation. You're my project. You come to me. Don't look at anybody else for help. Okay? And then when he put on flesh and walked amongst us, he said, I want to introduce you to my Father, where I get all of my understanding from. The one greater than me. The one who's going to show up when this is all done. The one I'm most excited about. Okay? When my children were really little, I didn't talk to them a whole lot about the Creator. I needed them to look at me. Just like all parents do. Listen to me. Focus on me. Do what I say, right? Now, we try to bring the Father in. I'm not saying we never talked about it, but it was really primary. I'm primary. Because that's all, even to us today as adults, we have a hard time with the unseen. But to that child, I was Savior, provider, protector. If you don't listen to me, I told my children, you are not safe. It is not safe when you don't listen. You ask any of my children, you can go to them this week and ask my children what my job is. And they will say, to keep us all safe. To keep us safe. You ask my son what his job is, he'll tell you to keep his sister safe. Because that's what I've put in their heads since they were born. But that's what Yahweh did with Israel. I'm here to take care of you, keep you safe, provide for you. All you need is me. I'm the one actively interacting with you. Hopefully, does that make more sense? Are we getting kind of there? It's a struggle because we're dealing with the unseen. It's that amoeba human being thing. An amoeba couldn't understand what we are. But what if we took that amoeba, that one cell thing, and turned it into a human being? It'd be like, whoa, I get it now. Because I'm like you are. I see you as you are because I understand what that's all about. Hey, I know what it means to have hands and legs and feet. And amoebas don't have these things, and eyes to see and all that. But if you tried to explain that to an amoeba now, how's it going to understand? There's no way to relate. So we're trying to relate to something we can't really see and interact with. That's why Yeshua had to put on flesh, so we could interact with him in a whole different way. That's one of the reasons, okay? So hopefully that makes some sense. Okay, there's a couple of more things in chapter 1. Can I add those in there real quick? Okay, you want to go back there? Okay, go ahead. Mac?
It's interesting we're talking about this topic. I've recently come across understanding the plural and singular form of Elohim, and we have words in the English like sheep, and sheep meaning singular or plural, and as I've beginning to learn about the importance of context when we're reading in the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, words like law and just the context of what the author is writing about, I think we should take into consideration with the word Elohim too. Psalms 82 starts off, Elohim stands in the congregation of El. He judges in the midst of the Elohim, and they're both spelled the same way. And we know that there's only one true, the great I am. And it says he's judging in the midst of the Elohim. And I could relate that, trying to make the connection from the spiritual to the physical realm, looking around in the congregation here with you at the head and maybe Robert at the side. And then you have a council at MTOI. Just trying to make that connection from the unseen to the seen realm. I just wanted to add that little content as where I'm at in my journey and learning and stuff like that.
Well, thanks for sharing. Appreciate that. Okay, you had one more? Sam?
Okay, to me, there's actually a pretty succinct answer to that back in the story of Joseph in Genesis 41:40, where Pharaoh himself says, let me pull it up here, be over my house, you yourself, and at your mouth all my people shall kiss. Only in the throne I am greater than you. So pretty much to the entire nation of Mitzrayim, Joseph was effectively Pharaoh until he was in Pharaoh's palace, in which case Pharaoh was directly Pharaoh.
Yeah, so, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, so to me it's pretty much the perfect way to depict that.
All right, awesome. Okay, so let me throw this in here real quick. A couple of points that weren't hit on yet. In John 1:14, and the Word became flesh and pitched his tent among us, and so we saw his esteem as the only one brought forth of a Father, complete in favor and truth, complete in grace and truth. So if he was complete in grace and truth, there's no more grace and no more truth. Okay, just wanted to throw that out there for you. Because apparently complete means done away with, according to mainstream Christianity, so no more grace, no more truth. No more favor, no more truth. Just be careful with that. Also in verse 16, and out of his completeness we all did receive. Well, wait a minute. Out of his already completed it and done it away with it, we received? See, this is the absurdity of translations, okay? Out of his completeness we all did receive, and favor upon favor. And so we have to be careful when people are applying things that they're not applying it equally everywhere. There's a couple of more things. In verse 43, this will be real quick. A couple of these ones I want to hit real quick. On the following day, Yeshua answered wished to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, follow me. So as he's gathering his disciples, excuse me, he tells them to follow him. Go back to the teaching on follow the pattern. The idea of following has to do with being in like manner as. Come and be like me. Don't just get behind me and follow me. It's not like if we're driving somewhere and I say to you, follow me because I'm going there and you're going to follow me and get you there. That's part of it. But he wanted them to imitate him, to become like him, to transform and conform into what he was and what he is. Okay, so that word there has a lot more to do with than just literally getting behind him and following him where he was going, because he knew the way. But he knows the way into the kingdom, and we should follow him there. But he also said, imitate me. It's the following had much more to do with being in the same manner as. All right? In John 1:50, he says to Nathanael, okay, Yeshua answered and said to him, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? Okay, so this idea of seeing under the fig tree. Now, obviously, he didn't see him there right that moment under a fig tree. He's telling me, I knew that this. Realize fig tree may not be literal here. It may be talking about, I saw you studying Torah. Okay, the idea of sitting under a fig tree, it was a metaphor, often an idiomatic phrase, often for the study of Torah. And so when he says, I saw you studying Torah, that was very impressive. How did you know I was studying Torah? Where did you see me studying Torah? You just met me. And not everybody studied. Not everybody had access to scrolls. Not everybody got to study. He said, I saw you studying Torah. That could be one of the possibilities here, other than just the literal. So I'm not saying that the literal is wrong and I'm right. I'm just saying, bear in mind, that could have been something going on. Okay? Because that even brings us to, like in Micah 4. Okay, you know what? I need my book. Sorry, I use the older translation, so it's easier for me to turn to everything. I know where it is in this one easier. But if you look at Micah 4:5 or so, let me see where it is. Okay. It says here, verse 4, Micah 4:4, but each one shall sit under his vine and under his fig tree, and no one will make them afraid. Why would it say sitting under a vine or a fig tree? Like that's a big deal. It says saying each one will be in their house and be okay, or each one will live in their neighborhood and be okay. He says, and each one will be allowed to study the word, and nobody will bother you. That's what it's talking about here. Each one will be able to sit under their, that's the metaphor, that's the idiomatic phrase. So you can see there's something there going on in John. John knew about Micah. Okay? And so we have those kind of things. And Yeshua knew about Micah when he said, hey, I saw you sitting under the fig tree. Okay, I saw you studying. All right. Let's see. There's one or two more things in chapter 1. Okay, and in verse 1, let's see, chapter 1 and verse 51. Let me get there. That's just a quick reference. We're not going to get into a big discussion about it, but that's a reference to what? What is 151 talking about? Truly, truly, I say to you, from now on you shall see the heavens open and the messengers of Elohim ascending and descending upon the son of Adam. Ah, good for you. Mark gets the prize. Yaakov's ladder. Okay? If you know your Old Testament, if you've done your Torah portions and you've studied your Tanakh, he says things over and over again that your brain should go, he just said he's the ladder between earth and heaven. He says, because they'll be ascending and descending upon him. And so what Yaakov saw, so he's saying, I am the ladder between. How cool is that? Okay? But if you don't connect them, you miss that completely. All right. So I just want to throw that little tidbit out there. Okay, chapter 2. As we're already, believe it or not, we're already at 11:30. See how fast this goes? Okay, Bob, chapter 2.
Yeah, I'd like to know what's going on in 3 and 4.
I would too. Next question.
Because the mother of Yeshua says they're out of wine. Okay.
I'm sorry, Bob. I had a wise guy somebody today, so it got to be you.
Hey, well, you know, if you shoot them, you can take them, I guess. Like the mother of Yeshua says they're out of wine. He said, it's not my time. Okay.
Okay, I actually wrote that down to be covered here. So this is one of the ones I wanted to cover. Good for you picking it up.
And yet they end up with the best wine they've ever had. Okay,
so what do you think's going on there? A lot of blank stares. Okay, so here's Yeshua. You got the answers, Eric? Good.
I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, it was one of those times where he said it wasn't the time for him to actually reveal himself as who he was, but at the same time, respecting his parents, he did the miracle anyways.
Amen. Good job, Zarek. Okay, so what we have going on here, notice what happened. It says here, when they were short on the wine, his mother says, okay,
excuse me, let's see. They were at the wedding, and they said, okay, his mother says to him, they have no wine. Now, the way she said it to him, she said it to him like, fix this. Okay? Hey, want to take care of this? And Yeshua said, it's not my time. He says, what is this to me and to you? My hour is not yet. And his mother said, now notice what happened. Did she say another word to her son? No. She went over to the servants and says, do whatever he says to do. We're dealing with the fifth commandment here. Okay? Yeshua had two parents. He doesn't want us just to know that he only listened to one. So his mother didn't even respond to him. Right in front of him, she looked at the servant and says, do whatever he says to do. She expected, as parents do, obedience. She knew who he was. But he had to demonstrate obedience to Torah completely. And you notice what his response is. He did what she said. There's no discussion, there's no argument. Did you notice that? There's another verse I could tie in with this, which I think is kind of cool. In chapter 4 and verse 27. Just go there for a second. And when his taught ones came, remember he's talking to the Shomerite lady. And remember, that was one of those deals where they don't really talk to the Shomernites, right? She said, well, you guys don't really interact with us. And it says, upon this, his taught ones came, and they were marveling that he was speaking with this woman. Okay? However, notice, no one said, what do you seek, or why do you speak with her? So they probably thought to do that, but at this point, now not always, at this point, they were showing respect to his position and authority to make a decision they didn't understand. Okay? And probably didn't agree with. This is part of discipleship. You're going to need to get into a relationship with the one discipling with you. Trust them enough because of relationship, not blind trust. But you trust them enough that you will always have a respect for decisions even if you don't understand at the moment. Because they walked into this in progress. Right? They weren't there from the beginning of the conversation. They don't know what happened. They showed up at this point. They don't even know that he told her she was right and said, I am the Messiah. He said, I am the one that you're looking for. That happened before they showed up. Because remember, later he goes, well, who do people say I am? They could have said, well, we heard you tell the woman you're the Messiah, They weren't even there for that. But they respected that he was doing something and made a choice, and they never asked him to explain himself. This is like a parent to a child. Often we say to the child, stop that or do this, and they'll be like, why? And you look at them like, no, there is no why. There's yes. Okay? Why is there just yes? Because you need to learn to trust me. I don't need to explain everything to you. I don't have to justify all my choices. That's what a parent would say to a child. Yeshua, his students are at least at that point here going, I don't know why he's doing this, but I'm not saying a word. That's an interesting little word. It's one verse. But that reaction, I think, is very important to see the respect. Because these guys are guys that are coming from a culture where normally be like, hey, how could you even talk to her? That's a Shomerite. They would have made a big issue of this thing. Because they did in other times, right? While he's sitting and eating with publicans or he's doing this with the children. So there were moments where they were like, I think we probably just don't say a word. We don't get it yet, but, And that was those moments where they were honoring and respecting that he's doing something I don't understand, but I'm going to allow him to do it without saying a word because that's not my place to say anything. Interesting. So that may be something to consider also with leadership. But remember, this is leadership that they highly respect because that respect has already been a relationship that developed. This is not dictatorial, cultish, you need to treat me this way because I said so. It's a relational thing. Okay, so that was another thing that was there that I think connects in, and that was part of the answer to the question about the water and the wine. Okay, what else we got? And by the way, in verse 10 of chapter 2, this is just to deal with especially the Adventists of the group who maybe came from a background where Yeshua turned the grape juice into better grape juice or something. I don't know, the water into grape juice. Okay? I've had that debate with so many of the Adventists that, and I'm not trying to pick on them, but they used to come a lot to our groups, and some of them still do, and used to drive me crazy with that.
verse 10 says that he turned it into the good stuff, and it's the good wine. And the way that it worked in a Jewish wedding, how long was a Jewish wedding? A week, right? Okay, so what would happen was every man at the beginning, that's a long event, sets out the good wine, because after all, people aren't drunk yet, they could tell the difference. And then later, when they are drunk, they take out the poorer wine because they're not going to know the difference. They're already drunk. They don't care. So they impressed them with the good stuff first, and here Yeshua turned it into the best stuff. And the wine steward was like, this wedding is like been going on long enough that they ran out of wine, so it's been going on a while here. It's towards the end, and now the good stuff? So let's not believe for a second that this was grape juice. Okay? This was not grape juice. This was wine. All right? And if anybody's confused about whether Yahweh allows for wine and strong drink, you go to Deuteronomy 14, I believe it is, where it says that when you take your money and turn it into your tithe, turn it into silver, bring it with you to keep the feasts, you can buy it anything you want, including wine and strong drink. Now, on this property, we do not have permission at this point. I have to check and make sure. But generally, they said we could only have the wine for the Passover Seder and for Kiddush and Motzi. And I think we're going to be doing Kiddush and Motzi in here, not in there, okay, in the other building. So that we're not going to do it in front of everybody else they have in their room. So I will double check that. But so if you had brought some, wait and check with me later to make sure if we're actually supposed to be doing alcohol in this property. We are in the South, and there are some, very strong feelings about alcohol in the South here. So let's just make sure we're respectful of the property's protocols. But we do have permission to use it just for those things at the moment. I'm going to check with them later today. Now, continuing in chapter 2. Okay. Oh, follow-up. Okay, Bob?
It doesn't surprise me coming from Yeshua it'd be anything but the best.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
No matter what it would be.
Yeah, absolutely. But the idea of it being grape juice, I just want to make sure that we're clear. There's not even a remote possibility this wasn't actually wine. Okay? Now. Jeremy?
Yeah, kind of on the same subject matter here. In 2:6, it says that the 6 stone water jugs, according to the mode of cleansing of the Yehudim. So these are some kind of mikvah type jugs, or I was kind of wondering about that. And it says that they hold, I was thinking like hand washing.
Oh, no.
But it says a measure, that's 10 to 30 gallons. I looked it up. So
yep.
I was just wondering what
these are big to fill out. Yeah, these are big for all the washings. Okay, so really but on top of everything else, where Yeshua really never missed a moment to kind of poke a little jab at the Pharisees and Sadducees and the leadership, he took their mikvah jugs or their washing jugs and he turned it into wine. Okay? And this wasn't so much for mikvah this was the other ritual cleansings that were Talmudically added. These are the ones they would be using for the washing of hands ritual and those kind of things. So he was messing with non-Torah issues, but added traditions that were being treated like Torah. So it's a good question. I don't always cover that verse, but it's a good question you ask, because that was one of his other sort of moments where now they couldn't do that tradition because he just turned all their water into wine. Okay? But this wasn't their drinking water. This is for all of these ritual cleansings that a lot of them had really gotten caught up in. Okay? And that was a big, big part of the Essene community. Okay? The Essenes in Qumran, the Essenes were very much what they would call ascetics. They were obsessed with washings and cleanings and oblations, which is what you find Yeshua mentioning and Paul mentioning as being, hey, don't get all obsessed with all that stuff as if it's Torah. If you want to do it, but don't go around attacking people who don't do it. Because that's man-made extra stuff. Okay? Anybody else? Nate.
In chapter 2, verses 18 through 22, Yeshua is talking to them about destroying his temple and rebuilding it in 3 days.
Right.
And we know that it talks about later that the third temple will be built. But I was wondering if you'd care to comment that we need to be working on this temple, just as Yeshua was talking his body being the temple, working on this temple and getting it cleansed and prepared for whatever Yahweh or Yeshua is going to bring to the earth.
No. Okay, next question. Okay. We did a teaching called, okay, anybody know the teachings that cover this? Okay, the first one is follow the pattern, where we make the connection between 1 Corinthians, do you not know that your body is the temple? Okay, so obviously that follow the pattern says that in Exodus 25:9, build the temple exactly according to the pattern, follow that pattern that you saw, that was given to you on the mountain. So he was to build the physical temple, the building, and then when we look at 1 Corinthians, I believe it's like 6:19 or whatever, that you would take that verse and say, oh, then we're supposed to build this temple exactly according to the pattern shown on the mountain being Mount Sinai when they got the Torah. Okay, so absolutely. Then the other teaching I would say would be a time to rededicate yourself, which is a pre-Hanukkah teaching, where it talks about cleansing out your physical temple, preparing it for Yahweh and for use for Kadosh purposes, because that was the Hanukkah celebration, was a celebration after the cleansing out of the temple, after the time with the Maccabees when they had to deal with the Greeks and get them out. All right, so you have that going on, and so yes, good point. And so, but the thing is also to realize that in this verse here, it says that when did the disciples figure this out? What does it say? After his resurrection. So one of the reasons he was accused and brought to Pilate is that he was accused of seditious, rebellious desire to destroy the temple. Because he said this thing. He didn't say, I will destroy it. He said, well, listen, if you destroy this temple, I'll raise it up. See, he made these comments a few times about not one brick upon brick and things like that, and that was a future prophecy. So he was accused of being basically a terrorist who's threatening to destroy the temple. That's one of the reasons he got arrested. But we have here that he was talking about his body, but it also says that his disciples remembered that once he was resurrected. Oh yeah, he said that, 3 days, then I'll raise it up. So until that moment, there was a lot of people speculating that he was talking about destroying the temple, which the zealots may or may not have been for, because the temple was such a key place, but they also knew that the person running the temple was basically a government hack, who had paid for his position. He was an appointee. Caiaphas was not the official, proper, legitimate high priest. Okay, so they had a lot of things going on in that. So excellent point. Next. Anybody else in chapter 2? Okay, let me add a few things here for chapter 2 that maybe didn't covered. If there's anything in my list. Nope, I'm good on chapter 2. Chapter 3. Hugo, you want chapter 3? Okay. Somebody on this side, okay? Nolan? I'm sorry, not Nolan. Amy?
Okay.
I couldn't tell who was getting handed the mic, so I didn't confuse Nolan with Amy, but just in case you were wondering. But they're sitting next to each other, and I didn't know, or one in front of the other. Amy, go ahead.
In verse 19, verse 19.
Yep, go ahead, 3:19.
And this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men love the darkness rather than the light, for their works were wicked. For everyone who is practicing evil hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. But the one doing the truth comes to the light, so that his works are clearly seen, that they have been wrought in Elohim. And just today, reading through that, it made me think of discipleship, like those who don't want to be discipled because they don't want their works exposed or whatever, but those who are ready to be discipled and have their works dealt with or whatever.
Awesome, awesome. And I like that most of you are hitting the points that I have on my list, and so I can just sort of check them off. So I have this listed as darkness versus light, so we're going to probably do a teaching on that at some point, where we just focus on this whole idea of darkness and light and that kind of thing. We do have a teaching called Yeshua, the Light of the World. Okay, so you might want to listen to that. But yeah, the contrast here between light and darkness is great, but I love that the wording is practicing evil and doing the truth. In other words, these are things that are being done. It's being expressed by your actions. Okay, these are so evil is something you do. People don't usually have a problem with that. They understand that evil is something that people do. But they forget that also righteousness is something you do. Okay? Equal weights and equal measures. If you do the bad stuff, then good stuff is also something you do. But see, we want to be told that stop doing the bad stuff and don't worry about the good stuff it was done for you. It just doesn't make any sense. All right? Okay, anybody else on chapter 3? Okay, Hugo?
I'm always interested, verses 9 and 10, that interaction. And Nachdimon answered and said to him, "How is it possible for this to take place?" And Yeshua answered and said to him, "Are you a teacher of Israel and do not know this?"
Exactly.
Okay, so where's the connection to the Tanakh that he should have known?
Okay. Marty, what did we call that? Messing with Nicodemus or picking on whatever it was. Okay, there's an in focus. Was it messing with Nicodemus? Is that the name of it? Picking on Nicodemus. So I don't have the verses in front of me of where it was in the prophets, okay? But you can go and listen to that little in focus called Picking on Nicodemus, and it goes through this section, all right? But that's a great question. You should be asking that question. Where should he have known this from? And I go to the verse and show you where that is. And then we read it and we go through it and we connect the dots so you can understand this whole conversation with Nicodemus, all right? I don't remember what teaching that came out of, but the in focus is called Picking on Nicodemus. Okay, so, but that's a good question, Hugo. I appreciate that. James?
Yes, my question, I have two questions.
If the light's on, it's off. Okay. That's kind of weird, but yes.
The two comments I have is, one, the mikvahs have to be, there has to be...
You got to keep that right here.
There has to be living water in the mikvah.
Mikvah, yeah.
And is the water jugs then, by adding the water to the mikvah, makes that living water?
No, those water jugs were more for these other washings. It wasn't for the mikvah. I misspoke when I said mikvah. That's why I clarified it. Said the water jugs that were turned to wine were being used for all these other washings, and they needed for these rituals. Okay? Now, as far as living waters, it could have been used for a mikvah from the point of view is that they would accumulate water from rain into cisterns or into water things that would have like gates or doors to release it into a pool, into literally like a pool, and then the water would flow out of it. So living waters means moving waters, right, not stagnant waters. Right. It doesn't have to be fresh rain, lakes, rivers, that kind of thing. So these cisterns could have been used for hand washings and all those kind of other things. They could have actually been used to pour into something, and then you would have had the waters moving. And they would have accumulated the water from rain. They didn't have like city water and stuff going through, plants and water treatment and etc. They would just put out and collect this water when it rained into jugs. So it could have actually probably been used for a mikvah. You would have needed a lot of them, to fill up water for people to go and get immersed in. Okay, and they had some of them there. But mostly these were these big cisterns they were using for all of their other washings they loved to use, these rituals that they like to do.
The other comment I have is Yeshua, when he was pierced, living water came out of him. Is there a deeper meaning for that? There's got to be something deeper for that.
When we get into the different symbols and things and everything to do with his death, that's probably going to need a lot more time than we have time for. Okay? But it was talking about the idea that you've got the blood and the plasma and all this other stuff coming out. And so the idea that he was pouring out the waters of his life, the waters of life, and that his life was being poured out. Getting into all the other stuff that was going on with that will take more time. Okay, and we're at this point still in chapter now 3, and it's already 12, and lunch starts in half an hour. We want to finish this up in 15 minutes. So we're going to have to work a little quickly here. Who else had their hand up? Okay, Janice? I'm impressed that I actually know everybody's name at this point mostly, so that's pretty good.
So am I. Could you do some clarification on verse 13 where it says that no one has gone up into heaven except?
Yep.
What about, was it Enoch who walked with God and was no more, and then prophet Elijah who went up in a flaming chariot? Clarification, please.
Okay. He says, and no one has gone up into the heaven except he who has come down from the heaven, the son of Adam. Okay, now, bear in mind that you do have the teaching on the Father and the Son that covers most of this. So if you haven't heard that yet, that covers most of this. Now, the word heaven, what does the word heaven mean? Shemayim. It means the sky. It means where the stars, the sun, and the moon are. It means where Yahweh's throne is. So heaven doesn't necessarily mean the place where the Father is in every time you see the word. Now it says that they saw Enoch be caught up and go into the sky. And then he was taken away and he was seen no more. That's all we know. So that doesn't answer the question, doesn't solve our mysteries, but it just says that he went, and according to Yeshua, not where the Father is. In other words, he didn't get to go and see. The whole point here is that no one has seen the Father. John 1 goes into that same thing where he says, no one has ever seen Elohim. So wherever Enoch went, wherever Elijah went, I don't know. But they saw them taken up into the sky. After that, we're not told. Okay? That remains a mystery. I know our Gnostic nature hates that. We want to know. But just realize there's no conflict here because heaven is not necessarily referring to the place of his throne. Okay? The birds fly in the Shemayim. The sun, the moon, and stars are in the Shemayim. That's the word that's translated as heaven. Okay? So we have to just realize that. Okay? So yes, they were carried up and they saw them go away into the sky. I don't know where they went after that. Okay, in the back, David, who do you have there?
Just me. Oh. I just wanted to ride on your coattails for a second. I have seen a lot of people get caught up in the various Gnosticism ways of doing things, and it takes them off in tangents that are way far off from where they need to be. And it takes them off into deep mysteries of all of this various stuff, and some of it's in Judaism, some of it's in other places. And the point is that, like Rabbi said, our Gnostic nature likes to know, and so we either go to people who have already made stuff up to fill those gaps, or we try to go into our own stuff to fill those gaps, and neither of those is right. We need to take what's actually written and go with it.
Amen. Look, also let's remember that we have to accept that there are things that he did and are true, and we don't get it. And that has to be okay. As a matter of fact, there's all too many of those. We see through the glass darkly, okay? In Deuteronomy 28, we're told that we're going to be, as a part of our punishment, groping around at midday as if it's dark, as if we like a blind person. We don't even see what we're doing. Same idea, the groping around, the seeing through the glass dimly or darkly. We're only seeing in part. There's other verses that talk about that. But one day we'll see in completeness, all right? Where's the mic? Okay, so we have people carrying the mic. Okay, good. We're still in chapter 3. One more thing I would bring out here is verse 36. He who believes in the Son possesses the potential for everlasting life, but he who does not obey the Son shall not see life. Did you notice that? Believing does not give you eternal life. But if you don't believe, you're not going to do. So believing gives you the potential. Of course, it doesn't say that in the translation, but if you can't figure this out what it means if you don't read the rest of the verse, because he says, he who believes in the Son possesses everlasting life. Good, end of story. Just believe in him. And, well, what does believe in him mean? If you believe in him, do you do what he says? If you believe in him, do you trust that what he says, and if you do it, is going to get the results he says? Or do you just believe that he existed and exists, and so you know about him? See, Christianity kind of has you thinking that way. You know who he is, you've heard about him, you've heard the stories, so now you believe that if you believe the stories, that's all you need to do. No, it's a relational thing. So it says, believing in him gives you that potential for everlasting life. And actually believing him, we're going to teach more in this teaching series I'm doing now, is that you're believing and understanding that what he did provided everlasting life, and whether you believe in him or not, it's there. Everlasting life is available to you even if you didn't know it. But if you do not obey, you're not going to get to see it. Does that make sense? Okay? I'm just writing these down. I'm going to make sure we use these verses like in part 2 or 3 of this teaching. Because they're part of that whole relationship between salvation, faith, and works. Okay? He made available everlasting life. If you don't obey, you're not going to get to see it. That's an important point. Anybody else in chapter 3? Okay, in the back. Christine?
So in verse 36, in the second and third line, could it also be read, but he who does not obey the word shall not see life?
Okay, I would expand it a whole lot more than that. We understand who the Son is. We understand from John 1 that the Son is the Word. We understand from John 14 that the Word or the Son was also the truth. We also know in John 1 that the Word is the light. We also know that the Word is the Torah. So we have all of these things. So I'm not a big fan of like the, what do you call it, those expanded, amplified Bible things. But you need to amplify certain things in your own understanding. When you see the word Son, Word, Light, Truth, Law, etc., Torah, all of that's the same. They're all connected to tell you the same thing. So when it says here, if you do not obey the light, if you do not obey the truth, if you do not obey, you see what I'm saying? You get it? You could put all of those in there, it's the same thing. Not obeying the truth, you're not going to have life. Not obeying the word, you're not going to have life. Not obeying the light, you're not going to have life. But they're not different things, they're all one thing. Yeshua is the light, is the truth, is the word, is the living, talking, walking Torah, he's the Son. And so thank you, Christine. Yes, we need to amplify all of that into when we see these things. But that's part of us redefining our terms. Okay, James.
Can you comment on, I've got a problem with my neighbors. I love them to death, but they're lost. And I can't believe, and I can't find it anywhere in Scripture for these people. There's got to be some type of retraining for these people.
Okay.
Because they're good people.
Good. Okay, first of all, let's stop referring to them as lost. That's Christian. The lost that's being referred to in the New Testament is Israel, the sheep that were scattered and lost sheep. Okay? They're just not eyes opened yet. Okay? They're not lost. They're just people he hasn't chosen to open their eyes and their ears and their hearts yet. That's his choice. Okay? Now, is there a plan for them? Yes. It's called the Millennium and Kingdom teaching. Listen to that first, and then you can, I couldn't possibly in the next, we got to be done here in 10 minutes. So there's no way for me to do that. If you want to ask me privately, I could try to explain it to you. It'll take about 15, 20 minutes, but I have a teaching that covers it. Okay? Called the Millennium and Kingdom. There is a plan for everybody. Rest assured, but you have to understand that it's his timing and his plan, not the way we would figure things. Okay? But there is a plan. You're right. There should be a way or a time or a process that they would get their chance. I agree with you. Any of you know a lot of really good people that don't get this? Don't worry about them. They will get their chance. They will get their opportunity. Okay? And it may not be in a way that you ever would have figured, and it may not be before they die this life. And I know that doesn't sound like it makes sense to some of you, but some of you have heard the teaching, so you understand. But there's a reason we have a millennium. And there's a reason why it's 1,000 years long. Okay? And so listen to the teaching. It'll help explain all that. All right? Chapter 4. For chapter 4? Okay? Robert, I got a hand up over here. And we have to try to wrap this up in the next 10 or 15 minutes because they serve meals on time down there. And then they expect us to be out pretty quick, so...
I have a question about how it seems like in each of the books, each of the chapters so far, whether it be Yohanan or Yeshua, he has had to identify himself to others. How do we identify ourselves to people in the world that love labels? How do we explain to them who we are? And
you buy a coin, and then on the front of the coin it says... Messianic, Torah Observant Israel. That's who we are. The reason we took that title for the organization is because it was the best way I could figure to describe who we are. We believe in Messiah, we observe the Torah, and then that makes us Israel. And so that would be the label. And actually this went across Marco Polo once, and the guys were like, well, I don't know how you... I was like... And one of the guys finally said, it's in the coin. You carry it in your pocket. Okay, but that's the best way I would explain who we are. Okay, so now it depends on the situation. If I'm talking to somebody like who sees the seat and just kind of wonders, and I say, well, I'm a rabbi or whatever I say, and they go, well, what's your beliefs or system, what denomination, whatever. if it's just going to be a 2-minute conversation, it's probably not going to go any further, and I'm just online somewhere or whatever it is, I may just say, look, think of it like Judaism and Christianity kind of mixed together. That's the simple answer. We believe in Messiah like Christians do, and we keep the Torah like Jews do. I don't need to get a whole lot deeper than that. If they want to, they'll ask more questions. So I give them an answer that is really answering the question there. They're trying to put a label on me, and they don't know what box to put me in, so I give them a box. That's a very simplistic one. They may ask a lot more questions, but usually I give that answer when there isn't really time for that. Because if I say I'm Messianic Torah Observant in Israel, then now that we have to have time to explain that for most people. So I might just say to them, look, think about it like a Jew and a Christian pushed together. And I just say, we believe in Messiah, but we follow the commandments. What did it take? 15 seconds? That's what I tell most people. And then if it goes further, it goes further. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Okay? Because they're really just trying to figure out how to put us in their own head to understand. And for most people, they get that real easily. Anybody else ever try that? It works simply, doesn't it? I mean, most people kind of get that. Okay, I get it. All right? Next, and okay, in the back, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We know that Moses met his bride at a well. Rebecca, the bride, was found at a well. When Yeshua meets the Samaritan woman at the well, is she a representation of the lost sheep, the bride? He says she wasn't married. She'd been married 5 times. Sounds like us to me.
Yeah, she does represent absolutely a lot of that whole lost sheep thing. Also, what did she say about the well? Whose well was it? But what you just say was Yaakov's well, or did you say our father Yaakov? She said, our father Yaakov. Are you greater than our father Yaakov? So she's admitting that they are part of Israel that's living in... See, the Shomronites were treated the way they were because these were Israelites who had assimilated during all of the other things that were going on and basically had become like the nations that took them over. And so they were looked down upon for that. But she identifies herself not as a Gentile, but as one who is living among and becoming essentially a Gentile by behavior, but by bloodline still Israel. So yes, she would represent, and there's a lot more teaching we could do about the Shomerite woman. And so again, I try to minimize these things knowing that we're covering 4 chapters. But yes, I would agree that she does represent, well, the us part that's not Judah. She's that, we got Israel and we got Judah. So she's part of the Israel part. Okay, over on this side.
Yeah, I was in where the taught ones came and they didn't say anything, right? No one said anything. And you said about obedience and respect in that instance. I was going back to in the first chapter where Yochanan said, I'm not able to even loosen a strap of his sandal. And I got a curiosity about why Nicodemus said what he said in the 3rd chapter. But all that, it seems that at one time or another, to open your mouth and to say something out of respect and obedience is maybe appropriate, and where another time it may be to keep your mouth closed and show that respect internally.
Okay, well, first of all, Nicodemus wasn't part of the group, so he didn't have that same respect that they did. Second of all, something I should have said earlier, but now that I'm thinking about it, you know, this is early on in the ministry, right? Okay, this is just getting started. Because John and others had such a high respect for who this was, they treated him a certain way, but guess what familiarity does? Okay, not so much breeds just contempt, but we get a lot more lackadaisical about respect and authority, and we get too comfortable. So later on in the ministry is when they start pushing away children and doing these other things, and, you know, because now they're taking it upon themselves. Instead of seeing themselves as nothing, now they see it, we're somebody's because we're his students, and we're going to make decisions. And so that happens later on. That level of awe and respect starts to diminish because of familiarity. You know, people get a little bit too comfortable. By the way, in leadership, we get this all the time. At some point, there are people that get a little bit too casual with the leadership. And that can really affect the way that they see and treat and respect leadership, so that they're not getting what they need to get out of it in terms of submission and guidance and stuff, because they get a little bit too comfortable. And we have to be careful with that. You know, you want to always maintain the right level of respect for people based on their position, not because it's a higher thing, it's because of how much you respect and appreciate their coming in and serving you. And that ability to do that is only based on how much you respect and trust them to allow them to do that. You get too comfortable, you start taking what they say very casually, and nothing goes right. Things start to go south. Okay? Okay, in the back. Christine, who went from over there to over here, messing me up. Okay, go ahead.
So I've heard some other teachings about the symbolism of the well, and I guess the symbolism of meeting a woman at the well. There's a few occurrences in the Old Testament. Would you be willing? Okay.
Again, it's the same thing that I was saying over here. It would take a lot more than we have time for. It's kind of like the question that came over here. Some of these things, we've got like 3 or 4 minutes, and it will take more than 3 or 4 minutes to even answer just that question. So we're gonna let that, now maybe I'll put that, if you keep reminding me, we'll stick it in a teaching at some point. Or at some point we're hoping to do, how would you guys like it if we did like a Q&A session where we could take these questions, give a 15 or 20 minute explanation, and then record it, and then we can have those recorded. So we can, okay, so we can accumulate some of those, all right? And so, and bring some of these questions, you know, to the Midrash night on, whatever night I wrote that down on my list, on Tuesday night. Okay, some of these things will maybe, like even your question will be a good one for Tuesday night. Okay, that one I'd be very happy to answer in front of everybody for 15 minutes, you know, about your neighbors and stuff. Perfect time to do that, okay, Tuesday night, after supper, okay? Now, we only have a couple of more minutes.
I went from live stream, I haven't done
Okay.
one yet. I want you to expand on the understanding of chapter 4, verse 21, please. If not at Jerusalem, where would he be alluding to? Chapter 4, verse 21.
Oh, because he was talking about the idea that the scattering was coming, okay? This is going to be only a few more years until we get to 70, when the Romans come in and throw them all out, and then nobody's doing anything there. Okay, so he was already telling them, look, you guys are arguing about where this is being done. Forget it. None of you are going to be doing this anywhere. This is going to all end, and you're all going to get thrown out. Okay, so that's what that's alluding to. Okay, let me just make sure I didn't miss any points I wanted to hit, because we only have a couple of minutes before we close here. Okay, I want to just hit a couple of things real quickly here. In verse 34, chapter 4, my food is to do the desire of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. That's a really interesting way of wording it. My food. My food. In other words, what sustains me is my desire to do the work and accomplish the work of he who sends me. That sustains me. That feeds me in my soul, in my being. That feeds me. It sustains me. I just think that's an approach that we want to learn. We're going to be like Yeshua-like. Understand that was what he was like. He was sustained and kept going and strengthened and given what he needed to function through his desire to please his Father and accomplish his work. And notice he was going to do stuff. I'm going to accomplish. By the way, he said, my food is to accomplish his work. And what's his last words he says? It is finished. Guess what's finished? The work he was sent to accomplish. What work was he here to accomplish? Start a discipleship program and die and be resurrected. Well, guess what? He did both of those. Okay? That didn't have any effect on what you need to do. Okay? But what he did was he accomplished that work. Now, in verse 50, I got 2 more real quick. In verse 50, okay, the man had come and he said to him, go, your son lives. And the man believed the word that Yeshua spoke to him, and he went. Now, it hadn't happened right there where he could see it. So that's a real powerful thing there. Here's someone who came and he believed, having not yet seen. Now, he believed even more strongly, it says, and after he saw what happened, it says he believed. Well, he believed, and then his belief was even made more strong. Okay? And so this is really an important thing that we see. That's the approach we have to have. We go before the Father, we go before getting that word, and we just trust it and we believe, even if we haven't seen it yet. And then in chapter 4, verse 23 and 24, we have this whole section that I want you to remember to go back to the teaching on understanding the Ruach, okay, and baptism of fire, both of those, where it says, "But the hour is coming now, is the hour when true worshipers shall worship." By the way, there's also the teaching called What is Worship? Shall worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father also seeks such to worship him. Elohim is spirit, and those who worship him need to worship in spirit and truth. And so I want you to understand, my understanding of this is spirit and truth. Okay, what's truth? Yeshua, the light, the word, all of that, the Torah. The instruction is truth. That is how he wants to be worshipped. You are to obey and keep his commandments. What is the Spirit? The Spirit is the fullness of how that was intended. Because there's much more than this, just the word says. How do we know? Yeshua starts his ministry with that in Matthew. We see, he says, "You heard of old not to murder." That's the truth. I say, but if you have that anger in your heart to want to kill him anyway, that was the spirit of it. You heard of old not to commit adultery. That's the truth. Well, I didn't commit adultery, but you wanted to. That was the spirit of it, not to even want to. You see what I'm saying? Fullness of what was intended. Okay? When it says Elohim is spirit, he says Elohim represents the fullness of what he intends for us, and what you become. What's the end result of that fullness? You become him. And so if we want to become him, he says he wants you to worship him in spirit and truth. Do what he says and understand how it was fully intended. The fullness of it. So that is explained in lots of hours of teachings on what is worship, the understanding of the Ruach, and the baptism of fire. So just want to put those plugs in. And I really have no guilt plugging all the teachings since they're all available free. And so I know it's out there. I watch some of these guys out there, and they're plugging those teachings, and they're like, on the website, don't forget, we could buy these teachings. Or they're selling their feast specials where you could buy, Well, somebody was doing a feast set for like $300 with all the teachings from a particular feast. And I was thinking it was only like 20 or 30 teachings. I'm thinking, what would they sell the heart of the matter for? 64 CDs or DVDs, And we ship them out. We have people that ask us for all of them. And we put them in more than one box sometimes because there's so many. And we ship them to people for free. That's somehow Father puts enough money in the box and we were able to do that. And we thank all of you for participating and helping others to be able to do that. But, these things are all online free. You don't need us to ship you anything. They're on YouTube. They're on Vimeo. They're on Podomatic. They're on iTunes. I mean, they're everywhere. You can get them without any problem for free. Okay. I think that's everything I have on my notes. Excellent job. Did you enjoy that today? Okay, where's the microphone? Where are the mics? Okay, there's one right there. Okay, Manny, go ahead and close us in prayer. So you forgot that from other feasts.
Father, I thank you for letting us gather here with our family, letting us just live in you, be in you, that we may hear and do. Father, thank you. Let us grow together. Let us really get to know one another, that we may understand what it is that you want us to live in community, how you want us to live in community, that we may bless each other, sharpening each other, both good and bad. Help us to understand what it is that you need us to be, who you want us to be, and just help make us in your image. Father, I thank you for our rabbi and for the amazing words that he provides and for the life-changing instrument that you are using him to be. I thank you for my family here, and I ask that you just dwell among us and help us to just really grow in you and learn the word, that we may do the word and ultimately defend it and teach it. Father, I thank you for everything you've allowed us to do, for letting us be here. I ask that you keep us safe and allow us to eat until we're satisfied. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Manny. And I won't do that to everybody at the end of each thing, but I caught you. Kurt was the first one I caught a couple of feasts ago. That was good. Shh. Hold on. Okay, so just a reminder, okay? And if you cut the live feed at this point, that's okay. But just a reminder that we're going to go, after we have lunch, we're going to meet back here at about 2:30. Okay, we're going to meet back here. That gives you a little bit of time to get to the marketplace. We'll try to open the marketplace at about 1:30 or so. We're going to get about an hour after lunch. We'll try to get somebody up here to run the marketplace. Meet over here, and then from here, you should be ready to either mikvah or do foot washing, because we're going to do one and then the other in whatever order we end up doing it. And so for the water, make sure you have something pretty good on your feet. Okay, because you're going in, no matter where we were going to go, you're going into either a lake or a stream or a pond or whatever it is. The ground could be uneven. You don't know what you're going to be stepping on. Please have on decent footwear and have your towels and whatever you're going to need. It's going to be cold. The place we're going to be doing it does have a changing, so if you want to bring your clothes with you and change there, you can change there and be ready to change out of your wet clothes there. There's a little bathhouse there that you can use. So I think it's got a ladies' side and men's side and everything. It's a pretty good sized building. So we'll be coming and meeting here at 2:30 to go and head off to the next two things. Amen?